Okay, right, we've come to our final panel of the day before we close. And as I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned on a few occasions here at WFS Africa, it remains a real career highlight for me. One of the moments I will always cherish and never forget when I covered the World Cup in 2010. It remains, for me, such a memorable competition for so many reasons. The amazing colour of the fans, the celebratory atmosphere of the entire tournament, from Shakira's Waka Waka that launched it to Spain's Tiki Taka that won it. I think that's sort of the nice sort of bookend that I consider when it comes to the FIFA World Cup. And I was so enamored with South Africa, I stayed on for another month to travel, to get to know the country, its sites, its people, its culture, its languages. And it was perhaps one of the best months of my life. I'm not lying. I really did appreciate every single moment. But what I was really wondering all the time was, what happens now? Does life return to normal? Or has it been irreversibly changed in some way? How can you really ensure an enduring legacy? How did that tournament positively change this country long term? What about the infrastructure that was being improved in the years before and that we saw then during the tournament, things like the Hull train? What has the impact on football been here? Lots to discuss here, and for this final panel, I will be chairing the discussion myself. So please welcome to the stage the President of the South African Football Association, Dr. Danny Jordaan. Dr. Jordaan, great to meet you. Thank you very much indeed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Very well. Please take a seat.
I'm fine.
Very excited to have this conversation. It's been our star moderators who've been guiding the discussions on stage. Now I get to have a go, and I'm very excited about doing so with your good self. Here we have behind us, and you can see on the vanity monitor in front here.
You must ask them whether they are somewhere sitting there.
Yeah, first of all, do we recognize this scene? I think a lot of people do. It's an iconic image. This is, of course, the World Cup final in 2010. And I think, where was I sat? I'm going to say over there somewhere. Those look like the press seats. And I remember I arrived at 2 p.m. on the day itself, and I stayed until well after the final whistle. And I have to say, it was, I mentioned this before, a career highlight for me to cover that tournament. So thank you for giving me that, by the way.
It was a cold night.
Yeah,
but cold night.
But you know what? Do you know what? I'm from England. We're used to it. We're used to it. So,
Okay,
you know,
it was
at least,
a
you get the sun in winter. We don't see the sun for a good 6 months. What is your abiding memory of the 2010 FIFA World Cup, Dr. Jordaan?
Well, these pictures. I think there are certain standout moments of the 2010 World Cup. Of course, it was a difficult journey to go there, and the road was bumpy, because we made a bid for the World Cup in 2006, and it was awarded to Germany. I think one of the things that I think people are not considering, of course, we blame Dempsey, but I think what had happened at the time is that FIFA had hosted the first co-hosted World Cup in Korea, Japan. Now, both Korea and Japan were bidding as independent, separate countries. They were then forced, but each one of them built between 10 and 12 stadiums. So from a financial point of view, they were both angry, and FIFA suffered huge losses as a result. The second thing that happened, it was the collapse of the ISL, the marketing arm of FIFA. So FIFA had serious financial problems. I think it was over $500 million losses that they suffered. So the next World Cup after Korea, Japan was 2006. And one of the issues that we had to address is whether an African World Cup would be commercially viable. And we are not talking about it, but we had to focus on that issue. So we had meetings with Coca-Cola, with all of the big sponsors, Adidas, and they all committed that they will fund a World Cup in South Africa. But I think there were many in FIFA that thought that maybe Germany is a safe bet, given the fact that we have to cover 500 million. I think that was one of the issues. But for us, it was a devastating blow. And then we went on to make a bid for the 2010 World Cup. And for the first time in the world of sport, there was this idea of a plan B. It has never emerged anywhere. Now, if the world of sport had to get a plan B, there should have been a plan B for the Athens Olympics. There should have been a plan B for the World Cup in Brazil. There's no such thing. It was reserved for Africa's first World Cup. And so this was part of Afro-pessimism. And one of the things that the World Cup dealt with is we dealt with Afro-pessimism.
Okay.
And when you look at investment on the African continent before 2010 and after 2010, you'll see investment streaming into the continent. Now people are looking at the African continent through different eyes. So I think that, for me, that's one of the issues. Then the second thing is that where we came from obscurity, we came from isolation, because remember, South Africa was, in 1964, was first banned by FIFA. In 1976, South Africa was expelled from FIFA. So we were outsiders. We were there obscure. The World Cup took us from obscurity and placed us on the center stage of African football and world football. Now, there are so many others, infrastructure. You see the stadium. We played, or Mamelodi Sundowns played Barcelona at the FNB Stadium. Now, I happened to be with the then president of Mamelodi Sundowns, discussing with them that we want Barcelona to play Mamelodi Sundowns. They were the local champions in South Africa at FNB Stadium. And I can remember them talking about that their preference was to go to the United States. And I must say that two players who swayed it for us was one, Gerard Piqué, and Messi. So I'm disclosing here, we met them at a restaurant, and we were advised, go and meet these two guys. So we met them, and they said, okay, it is the CEO. Was totally against coming here. So we went to the meeting, and Messi and Piqué said, look, we have decided we are playing in South Africa against Mamelodi Sundowns. You will find your team to go and play there. We are not playing there, we're going to South Africa. When he came to the stadium, and he was sitting there, and we had dinner, it was then that he realized, and he said to me, you know, this stadium is better than Nou Camp.
Wow, that's an admission and a half, isn't it?
And yes. So you can see the important thing that you have to demonstrate to people. They assume, it's Africa, we know them. I mean, I heard that story so often. We know Africa. The buses will be late at the match. The TV will be down. And unfortunately for them, the Euro finals in Austria, in the semifinals, there we're sitting in the stadium, there was a break in transmission. So I said, I can guarantee you, there will be no break in transmission in any of the 64 matches in the World Cup in South Africa. That we guarantee you. So at the end, they now were singing the praises of the operations of the World Cup in South Africa. And then there was a wonderful picture. We have many of these cartoonists. And one had a picture, and there was a lot of newspapers on the table. And there were boards saying British journalists. And they had knives and forks, and they were asked, what are they doing? They say, no, they're eating their own words.
Oh, I see. Very good.
So I think many of the people had to eat their own words.
Yeah, do you know what? I can chime with that. I mean, I came over to South Africa and tried not to have any preconceptions when I covered that tournament. And I was always, as I mentioned, I was always constantly being asked for my opinion. What do you think of our country? And my view was that you delivered an impeccable World Cup, a real festival of football. And, I fell in love with the country after that. And I went home with very, very positive memories of the entire tournament. As you say, you staged it. You staged it professionally. And I think people changed their perceptions of Africa. I think as a sort of if you want to call it a sort of PR project, it was an amazing success. There's no doubt about that. This panel is centered around the legacy of that World Cup. Let's have a look now at the performance of the national team at World Cups. And you can see there that, South Africa obviously was a regular at the World Cup, 98, 2002, obviously hosted in 2010, group stage throughout. A couple of nations have managed to break through and get through to the last 16. Quarterfinals, of course, memorably in 2010, Ghana, a Luis Suarez handball away from a first ever semi-final for an African nation, which would have been history being made. But talking about Bafana Bafana, how would you assess their performances on the world stage at AFCON since 2010, over the last 12 years? What's your assessment, briefly?
I want to, later we want to talk about the international match calendar.
Yep, we'll come to that.
Because I will show you the impact of the international match calendar on national teams south of the equator. It's not just Bafana Bafana. It is South Africa, it's Zambia, it's Angola, it's Kenya, it's all of these south of the equator. How is it that most of the countries qualifying for the World Cup sits north, sits 2 hours from Europe? It's Egypt, it's Morocco, Tunisia, it's Senegal, and so on. And so there is something there, and we will talk about it later. But there are two things that emerged from our own World Cup and our two national teams. Tremendous progress of the women team.
For sure.
We hardly had women football structures by 2010. And today, as we sit here, our women's world team is going to its second consecutive World Cup. They are the African champions. Our men's team has been in decline. And our number of players that we had in Europe, our team in 1996, all 11 players plus the substitutes were all playing in Europe. Today, if you look at our national team, there's 2-3 from Europe and not from the major clubs. What we have done is we now, as we speak, we have 65 young players playing in Europe. So we have to get them in to start at an earlier age and graduate into senior football.
Well, how long do you think this process is going to take? Because as you say, there's been a decline, there's been a drop-off, and you want to try and not necessarily recreate the golden era, but have a new golden era, which is its own in its own right. How far away are we from having a crop, the likes of, I mean, we know the names from years gone by, Benny McCarthy, Stephen Pienaar, Lucas Radebe, we remember, Aaron McQueen, I remember interviewing him before the 2010 World Cup. He was playing at Portsmouth at the time in the Premier League. How far away are we now from having a similar crop of players in the future?
That's why I said we invested in the youth. We went to under-17 World Cup. In 2017 and 2019, we went to 2 consecutive under-20 World Cups. We went to 2 consecutive Olympics. We had a team there in Rio, 2016, and now in Tokyo, which moved to 2021. So these players are emerging. And so our coach now has said, if you are 30, you'll hardly be in this team. You're bringing a young generation because by 2026, there will be 9 teams qualifying for the World Cup. We have to be one of the 9. So that is the target, but we have to do the work. But alongside that is coach education. Because, we had about 1 coach for every 200 players in our country. In women's football, we hardly had women coaches. We just took a decision that every women national team must be coached by a woman. we were criticized. The women have no experience, and so Desi Ellis is one. She was playing there at a small club in Cape Town. We brought Vera Pau, made her an assistant coach, and then she's a coach. One of the most successful coaches on the continent, voted 3 times best coach on the continent. So we can see the change. On the men's side, of course, unlike the women's competitions, we control directly. On the men's side, we have no control over who the clubs release and who coaches the clubs. And even there, one of the issues there is there must be a consistent level of proficiency, qualification to be a coach in our most senior men's side. And that is because if they go to the CAF Champions League, you cannot sit on the bench unless you have an A license. There is no such requirement in our league. So we have to fix all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think then you'll see. Our target is 2026.
I mean, that's going to come. I mean, obviously, we're just now, just before the 2022 World Cup, but 2026, we know it will be here in no time, it will feel. These next 4 years are likely to speed by. Do you think that there is a degree of patience needed because you're in this transitional phase? You're not competing at that elite level. There have been times you haven't qualified for the Africa Cup of Nations, let alone a World Cup for the men, the senior men. But is there a degree of patience to say, look, we will do our utmost to make it into one of those 9 teams who qualifies for the World Cup in 2026, but at the same time, we need to think longer term than that?
Yes, but you must never ask any fan of a national team or a club to be patient.
Why?
They want the trophy now. They want the 3 points now. You cannot tell them about. So you have to leave them, let them criticize as long as you don't lose focus.
Yeah.
And we are saying to our coach, we are going to leave you and support you, but we want to see progress. We want to see the building of the national team. And I think people of the country have been a little patient with him, but he is also a no-nonsense person.
Okay.
He doesn't
business-minded.
No, he takes clear decision and he doesn't waste time. So the players, what has happened in our team is greater discipline, greater focus, greater commitment. And those are the most important ingredient. You see the difference between South Africa and most of the African countries. You go to Senegal, 100% of the players come from Europe. Their team is not a product of their development. It's a product of their export.
Yeah.
And the French countries, because of France's colonial policy of embracing anyone into France who's from a French colony, give them all the support. France is basically a development area for all of the French teams. So you find the best African teams are those teams with 100% of the players coming from Europe. The worst African teams are those teams with not a single player from Europe. And that must not give us comfort, must say to us, when are we going to produce our own development structure?
Yeah.
A team developed by us to compete with the best in the world, the Germanys, the England,
and you're seeing it in the women's game, aren't you? That's the thing, is that the proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely.
Let's celebrate the women's game, because I think that, if we look at this here, and we're searching for those South African flags on the left of your screen there, and there's, it seemed like it was always the bridesmaid, never the bride with South Africa, but then finally winning CAF for the first time. They're as you mentioned, Africa champions, 6 wins in a row to do it. How much of a breakthrough moment do you feel that was?
I was there in the stadium when we played. We played Morocco in Morocco. When we were driving to the stadium was full. The buses and cars were still streaming to the stadium. And felt pity for our team because we had about 10 people in the stadium. They had 59,000 and 990. And in the end, we see the assistant referee, or the referee is showing the assistant 4 minutes extra time. The assistant goes and put up the board 9 minutes. We say, oh, this is it. So it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I bet it was.
In the extra time. But the players showed the ability to stay calm, to stay focused, and to fight until the end. So yes, we're very proud of them. And it's not just for African football in our country, but Zambia is doing well. Morocco is doing well. Senegal is emerging. Well, Nigeria, Ghana has been there for many years. But you can see the performance of women's national teams are really going to show global football. We are not going to wait like on the men's side. After almost 100 years, out of 211 countries, you only have 8 countries that have won the World Cup for men. So, on the women's side, it is as bad. Out of all the Women's World Cup, the first in 1991, only 4 countries won the Women's World Cup.
Yeah, we have it there. Germany, Norway, Japan, USA. Although I wager that might change in Australia and New Zealand in next year. I think England might have a chance, so I think they might add to that list.
England is awesome.
Do you know why? Oh, thank you for saying that, by the way. I'll take that as a compliment.
No.
But one of the things that I think I admire greatly about the Lionesses is that when they won the Euros last summer, so we both had a great summer, let's put it that way. When they won the Euros in the summer, immediately after that tournament, they took the opportunity to set their legacy then and there. They wrote a letter, a public open letter, to the 2 candidates that were due, one of whom was going to take over as the UK Prime Minister because there was a change of Prime Minister at that moment and the party in power were deciding who that was going to be. And they wrote that letter saying, we urge you to take this opportunity as the leaders of our country to make football more accessible to young girls through physical education at school, but just generally in their lives, because we understand that we are role models, we are footballers, yes, but we understand that the world of football these days involves us having to be responsible and use our platform for good, and this is what they did. Do you think that Banyana would also like to have a role like that, you know, winning the Africa Cup of Nations, but also at a World Cup, just using that platform to inspire the next generation of young women?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. They're already doing that. And, you know, we have a university called University of the Western Cape. They just launched a program which they called the Shibobo program. Now, Shibobo is a local phrase they use in football. They had girls between the ages of 6 years and 8 years. And you have to see these girls encouraged by Banyana players. So that victory of Banyana has changed the landscape. Of course, the same with your team. The issue that then emerged is a question of pay parity. Is the women team of Tottenham Hotspur going to get the same as the men team of Tottenham Hotspurs, of Man United, of Arsenal, of Chelsea, and all of your women teams? Because those are the issues that's confronting us. Now, that's one of the big challenges.
We have it here. I mean, comparing the World Cups. I mean, look, here we go. Let's read through it, shall we, Dr. Jordaan? Total revenue for the women, $780 million US. Prize money, $4 million US. If I glance over to my right, for the men, $6 billion US total revenue from the World Cup and prize money of 40 million. I think that's about as far away from parity as you can imagine, isn't it?
Yes, and it got worse. When we hosted the World Cup in 2010, the revenue from that World Cup was $45 million. And the strange thing is, as I told you earlier, that one of the things that they were worried about, we must brace ourselves for the World Cup on the African continent for huge losses. 2006 in Germany, FIFA generated 2.8 billion. Yeah, 4.5 billion. So almost 50%, 53% more on the Africa's first World Cup as opposed to Germany. Now, if you look at the difference, you will see what is it that the Women's World Cup generate just over 700 and billions in the men's. If you look at the commercial profile of the Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup, and men's football and women's football, I'm watching the focus on the 2010 and the World Cups now on the television. They have a program called Icons programs, Pele, Maradona, every day. Then there are programs of matches in 74 and so on. Then there are other matches. I want to see, leading up to the Women's World Cup, where are similar programs for women? There's none. You see, so what is the problem? The commercial program of women's football is essentially based on 90 minutes of football. They televise the match for 90 minutes, and that's the end of the story. You go to the men's game, you watch the match, you start with the referee, interview the referee. When you go to the women's, they don't interview the referee, they don't interview the coaches, there's nothing. Now, that is the match. 90 minutes is done. On Monday, they now bring a referee expert to analyze all the referee's decisions. Then on Tuesday, they now bring all the fans to analyze the match, to talk about. Then they bring the players. Women's football is a 90-minute commercial activity. And therefore, the commercial structure of women's football can never generate the revenue of men. I don't want to talk about the new media of what they've done. You look at Ronaldo and Messi, 120,000 followers. Where is Rapinoe? There's nothing. So we can sit here and complain, but unless, starting with FIFA, they commercialize the women's football, because you must remember where it started. If you buy the rights of the Men's World Cup, you are given the rights of the Women's World Cup as a sweetener. It has no value. When you ask people who are marketing people, they say, no, the market determines that the value of, when Barcelona play Real Madrid, 90,000 people in Nou Camp, men, Barcelona play Real Madrid, 90,000 spectators, women, it is 100 times more than the women's television. So how can the television explain when the profile of that stadium of 90,000 people, like in your final, when you play Germany, the mother was there, the father was there, the entire family is there. On the men's side, it's not a family affair. It's a male macho thing with a few females. And when you go back to the marketing, so maybe we should discuss this thing and bring those marketing experts that determines that 90,000 full stadium of men has 100 times more value than 90,000 full stadium for women.
However, it's undeniable that the women's game is growing and that there is a lot of focus now, I think through a whole different bunch of factors, to try and genuinely make a beeline for women's football and grow the game. Now, you've got an opportunity to contribute to this yourself. I mean, you've made a bid to host the 2027 Women's World Cup. You can positively influence this competition. You can make a contribution to try and get somewhere near a little bit more parity.
No, absolutely. That's why we want to make a bid for the Women's World Cup for 2027. The decision will be taken probably in 2024. And what FIFA has done, starting with this World Cup for women in New Zealand, they created a separate commercial program, a separate brand identity for the Women's World Cup. Now, even in the name, it's called FIFA World Cup and FIFA Women's World Cup. It's not called FIFA Men's World Cup and FIFA Women's World Cup. So it just creates the impression that there is one World Cup,
yeah, which
and
is
then
more
there's something
senior
else
than the other. Yeah.
So we have to look at these issues. And then one of the pressures that all the bidders will face for 2027 is to take the commercial structure of Women's World Cup to the next level, because we have to see what the results would be, what would be the broadcast revenue from Australia and New Zealand, and commercial revenue, and what is the impact worldwide on television audience, on new media platforms, and so on.
I think that will be a useful sort of moment to take that litmus test, if you like. I think that from our perspective, certainly working as I do in UK broadcasting, seeing the uptick for women's football in terms of audience, in terms of fans going through the turnstiles, attendances, a sellout not just for that game against Germany in the final, but then the first friendly after that, which was against the world champions, the USA, which England won again at Wembley. So that for me shows maybe a consistency. It's not just a one-hit wonder, not just a one-tournament wonder. I do believe, similar to those numbers you mentioned for the Camp Nou, for the Barcelona Women's Champions League games against Real Madrid, and then against Wolfsburg as well, when they even beat that attendance, 91,000. But the generation of revenue through the DAZN TV rights deal, through YouTube, that there's suddenly now more real interest, genuine interest. It feels like there's been a change of mindset, a change of attitude, but we need to see that check out commercially longer term. So we'll see what happens as a result of that tournament next year. Just bringing this a little bit closer to home, I guess. When you had Vision 2022 here in South Africa, and one of the parts of that was gender equality, and you decided to launch a women's national league here in 2019, teams guided by qualified female coaches. How much of a difference do you feel that has made?
I think that our national women's team certainly performed at a higher level. As I said, we took a decision. There is this coach, Vera Pauw. She's now with Ireland in the World Cup. And we appointed her. And then we appointed Desiree Ellis as her assistant and asked her that over the next 2 years she must monitor her, so that she must indicate to us whether she's ready to take over. And even at that point, where Vera came to the end of her term, still people said, no, she's not ready, and all of those things. We said, look, show me one trophy that a man coach won with this Banyana. There's nothing. The cupboard is empty. So the men did not win anything. Why are you concerned if the women also now are going to win nothing? Give them a chance also to win nothing. We're going to appoint them. And now our first trophy for Banyana.
So you believe that's directly related, that the fact that you have a women's national league in South Africa, qualified female coaches, has had that direct impact?
Absolutely, because from there many of the players are now playing in Spain, Switzerland, in the United States.
So they're getting that early pathway through to these other places.
And
so it's the women who are showing the men how it's done, basically.
Yes, and they are Rand millionaires now. We've produced the first Rand millionaires women football, all those who are playing overseas. The second thing that was striking to me is when we offered the women the bonus. Now, I then asked them, what are you going to do with this money? Not a single one said, I'm buying a Mercedes-Benz or a Bentley, or no. I'm buying a house for my family. I'm building another room. My father lost his leg. I'm buying a prostate leg for my father. And you can see these women footballers are rooted in their families. They want first to see the transformation and the changes in their family first. The men footballers, let me not talk about it.
I'm not sure we have time. We're just starting to run out of time. We've got about 7 minutes left, Dr. Jordaan. So I think I'll probably whiz around a few topics, and then we'll come back to the international match calendar that you mentioned before. In terms of youth football, I mean, I think it was highlighted even before 2010 that this needed to be where the focus was. Are you satisfied that it is now getting the support and investment that it deserves? You mentioned about those youth sort of categories, the under-17s, the under-19s. Give it a grade if you like. Give it a sort of how satisfied are you that you're now going in the right direction as far as developing youth football is concerned?
No, I'm not satisfied, because you must not, as South Africans know, you can't be satisfied just to qualify. Like England, you now want to win the Women's World Cup and the Men's World Cup. That is where we must focus.
Right.
You never work hard to come second.
Well, they say that second is the first loser sometimes, don't they? Second is the first loser sometimes, people say, which is a little bit harsh. But
nobody remembers you. If you come second, nobody remembers you. Ask you, who was second after Liverpool in the last English Premier League? Who cares? Nobody cares.
In terms of, having that impact at a local level, in terms of the structure for the youth football, I mean, you have, for example, the Transnet School of Excellence. How much of a blueprint does that give you? Do you need more of those kind of centres and facilities? What's your take on that?
No, absolutely. In modern international sport, the players are produced through academies. It's not by chance. It is a scientific approach. And so we have, for example, for women, we have our academy at the High Performance Center at Tuks University, University of Pretoria. 80% of the players who are in Banyana come from that High Performance Center. We just yesterday took a decision that we're adding another 12 players to that academy in view of the fact that we want to make a bid for 2027, and the production line for those players must start now. Now, on the men's side, we do not have a resident national technical center, and that is what we have to fix, because the academies are mostly with the clubs, and you have no control. But in order to produce the national team, there must be a national philosophy, there must be a clear strategic vision, and the players must be there every day. So that is what we have to do if we have to fix on the men's side. We have to integrate the players that we have in Europe, playing for all clubs. These are young players, 14, 16, 20, playing there. And so that's why I'm saying that we're looking at qualifying for 2026. We'll have the players by then.
Let's go to then that slide I mentioned before, saying about the international match calendar. Sorry, I'll push past it. As it stands at the moment, it's, let's say, put it this way, it's not particularly beneficial to South Africa, is it? The way that it's structured at the moment. Tell us why, and tell us how you hope that might change.
Now, I think when I look at the African continent, you look at what is the international match calendar. The international match calendar allocates 5 slots of 8 days in any particular season. And in that 8 days, you must play 2 matches. And these matches may be World Cup qualifiers, or it may be African Cup of Nations qualifiers. Now look at the African continent. If you are in Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, South Africa, Zambia, you cannot fly direct to the country of your opposition. We have to play Liberia. There are no direct flight there. We have to go to Paris. It's a 10-hour flight, and then fly back. And so it is. So out of your 8 days, 2 days you must take out for travel. And it can be worse because sometimes the flights are delayed and so on. So you have 6 days left. Out of your 6 days, 2 days are match days. So you've got 4 days left. Now, then, because they come from Europe, and both the European clubs and the local clubs are refusing to release the players come late. So you often find that the coach is sitting with 1 day before the match, or a maximum of 2 days before the match. Now, I ask you, where is that coach that can get his squad 2 days before the match and win anything? Going to win nothing.
Well, he's had his hands tied behind his back, hasn't he? He's not able to do his job properly.
Everett Grant, who coached at Chelsea and also coached Ghana, he is saying this thing is not working for Africa because there are no direct flights in Africa. So what must we do about the problem? We have to look at, take 2 months, whether it is May and June, or September, or October, November, 2 months, and those 2 months is for the national team only. Then the rest of the months is for your club only. So no club must release a player to a national team, and no national team must release any players. So the coach knows, I've got March and April, I'll have the team here for 2 months. I can build the team and play. Do you know why we won the African Cup of Nations in 1996? It is because that team was in camp for an entire month. Entire month. The league was stopped, was postponed. Give the team a month and expect the team to win AFCON.
Yeah.
You not give them 2 days and 3 days, don't expect them to win anything. So we are going to make this issue, raise this issue with FIFA to say 2023 is the end of the international match calendar. We want an international match calendar that clears 2 months for a national team, 6 or 8 months for your, or 6 months for your league, and then 2 months for national teams. Take Messi. Messi plays for Paris Saint-Germain. He must travel 17 hours to go and play for Argentina. He's finished, he must play 17 hours back. He gets in Paris, they play Real Madrid, he must travel immediately. Messi did not win the World Cup. So it's a drain on the players. It is a disadvantage for national teams. It is a disruption for the clubs. So we have to separate. Play for your club and stay there for 4 months. Stay 2 months for your national team. And I think you are going to see better performances for all African teams on the continent.
It's why, I suppose, people talk about the pre-season being so crucial to the success of a season. What happens, say in a normal European season in May has been, inevitably affected in a very direct way by what happened the previous August or July.
Absolutely.
Because the pre-season managers say this all the time. They work so hard to get the conditions they want, and they lobby, their club to say, we want to go here, we want to go there, actually we need to do this, we need to do that. Because that pre-season, that stability of, a month or maybe longer is what builds into their season and gives them the greatest chance of success.
And by the way, I think, this is the first World Cup that comes in the middle of the club season. And I can tell you now, the African teams are going to perform like hell in this World Cup. Why? Because if the tournament, the World Cup is in June, they push to win the Charity Shield, the league, the Champions League. By the time the player comes to the country, it's finished. Now they're in the middle of the season. They are not exhausted. They are not stressed out. They are going to give better performance for their national teams.
Do you think we're going to get a quarter-finalist from Africa? A semi-finalist from Africa? Is that too
I would have said yes. Senegal, now we have a serious injury to a key player, and
it's a shame, isn't it?
we just keep our fingers crossed that somehow we recover. I think that we expected a lot from Senegal. We'll see. Ghana is in again there with Uruguay. Maybe
maybe a little bit of revenge.
But they still have their man there.
Yeah.
He will be on the field again. So I don't hope that...
Keep your hands down, Luis. Keep your hands down. You're not a goalkeeper. Just before we close, we've discussed legacy from the 2010 World Cup, but I'd like you to look into your crystal ball for me, Dr. Jordaan, and look forward. And, if we look, let's say, beyond a potential 2027 Women's World Cup in South Africa, we hope that, you maybe get the chance to host that tournament. If we look towards 2030, what would you like South African football to look like? Give me an idea, if you paint the picture of what the future could look like if you get things right.
Well, I think we have a plan, Vision 2030. When we started off, we said one of the problems of football is that our player-coach ratio was 200 players to one coach. When you look at Germany and Spain, who won the World Cup, their ratio was 20 players to one coach. The second thing is that coach has the lowest coaching qualification, or was just a player who stopped playing and is now a coach. So we had to change and get proper qualified coaches. And by the way, those coaches in England and Germany, they are all A-licensed coaches, and they are all professional licensed coaches. And the other thing is that they are coaching at the junior level, at under 15, under 17. So it's not like the university and the school, that your best teachers and your professors at the university. In football, the professors must be at the primary school, because that is where the basics start. And so we have to produce more coaches, and I'm happy that we're on the way to produce high-quality coaches. We have 3 coaches now coaching outside the country. One is with Man United. One is two of them are in the Middle East, and one is just going to the United States. So we have to encourage our coaches to go and coach outside the country, because that experience will help us. So once we have that in place, the second thing is that we have to look at our clubs. Is a 16-team league big enough for us? Most of the European leagues are 22, 20. None of them are 16.
No.
So some of the smallest league in the world is in our country. So we have to talk about it. But we just must not increase the numbers. We must increase the club structures, greater financial support for the clubs, so that they can produce the players to go into the national team. So that is one of the other challenges that we have. And then, unfortunately, like in Spain, well, things are changing now, but before the season starts, and in England also it changed, before the first ball is kicked in the season, it is Chelsea or Man United or Arsenal. Well, now with the Middle East coming in,
City
Man City. And So
Liverpool.
the billionaires has changed that scenario. But you could predict it's Real Madrid and Barcelona is going to be the top, and the others must just play to avoid relegation. Now, you cannot have such a league where you know now 3 clubs are going to compete to win all the trophies. The other clubs must just fight to avoid relegation.
You need more balance, more
you
competitive
need more balance, more competitiveness there. And then we must go to the World Cup in 2026. And by 2030, we must be in the final stages of that World Cup.
Okay, so that's the target. Knockout stages
That's where
of,
we're
that,
going.
of that World Cup.
On the women's
2030.
side, we want to see women, maybe not 2023, 2027, must be in the last 4.
Right. Wow.
For 2027.
I love that ambition. Maybe even 2027, potentially hosted here, maybe a final with England involved. I mean, who knows? But
we would love that.
We would love that as well. I would love to come back to your country in 5 years' time to cover that event. Because, as I say, I had lots of amazing
and
memories.
this time we'll sit together there at the F&B Stadium.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
We have the
that.
stadium, we have the atmosphere in the stadium, everything. So you must just come along.
Well, listen, my fingers crossed to you guys for that process that is coming up, and let's see what happens in 2027. It's been a fascinating conversation, Dr. Jordaan. Thank you very much indeed. Big round of applause, please, for Dr. Jordaan, President of SAFA. Thank you.
Okay.
Very kind. Off you go. Thank you very much indeed.